The hands were trembling. Not violently, not the shake of a coward or a man who had lost his nerve, but there, unmistakable in the morning light, was the subtle quiver of fingers that had already decided to cross a line from which there could be no return. Daniel Hartwell pressed his cheek against the stock of his Lee Enfield rifle and felt the cool metal ground him back to the present moment. The desert stretched endlessly before him, a canvas of sand and stone painted in shades of amber and rust under the North African sun. April 7th, 1943. The temperature was already climbing toward 103 degrees, and his uniform clung to his skin like a second layer soaked in sweat in the weight of what he was about to do. Around him, carefully arranged in a semicircle that had taken 45 minutes to construct in the pre-dawn darkness, lay the evidence of his rebellion. Torn sandbags filled with local earth, metal scraps salvaged from a downed Messerschmitt still bearing the faded crosses of the Luftwaffe, canvas treated with desert mud to eliminate any trace of glint or shine, and there incorporated into the makeshift deflector shield the inner lining of his own combat helmet destroyed in direct violation of military property regulations. Every piece of this system was forbidden. Every modification flew in the face of established sniper doctrine. Every moment he remained in this position was an act of disobedience that could end with a court-martial or a firing squad. The American sergeant had handed him the order 3 hours earlier. Clear, direct, impossible to misinterpret. All reconnaissance units withdraw immediately. Return to base. The artillery barrage on observation point 117 had been postponed due to ammunition shortages. They would try again tomorrow. Another 24 hours of German spotters calling in devastating airstrikes on American positions. Another day of boys from Iowa and Texas and Georgia dying because trained Luftwaffe forward air controllers could see every troop movement across 30 square miles of desert. Daniel had listened to that order, had acknowledged it through his spotter private first class Marcus Sullivan, had watched Mac's face transform from professional acknowledgement to dawning horror as Daniel adjusted his scope and settled deeper into his forbidden position. Through the narrow opening in his deflector shield, Daniel could see them now. 873 yards away, confirmed by rangefinder, the German observation post was coming awake with the morning. Smoke rose from cooking fires. Figures moved between sandbag positions. Voices carried across the desert, faint and distorted by distance, speaking a language Daniel did not understand, but whose purpose he knew with absolute clarity. 22 men. That was what the last reconnaissance report had confirmed. 22 Luftwaffe personnel staffing observation point 117, 2 trained forward air controllers with the knowledge and authority to direct bomber squadrons, 4 radio operators maintaining constant communication with airfields in Tunisia and Sicily, 16 security and support personnel from the 21st Panzer Division. In the 3 weeks since that post had become operational, those 22 men had been responsible for 367 Allied casualties, 74 vehicles destroyed, 2 major supply convoys disrupted. The mathematics were brutal and simple. As long as those spotters remained operational, American boys would continue to die at a rate that made Daniel's stomach twist with rage and helplessness. But there was another set of numbers, a different calculation that Daniel had worked out in his notebook the night before sitting in his tent while the rest of his unit slept. 2 lives at risk, his own and Mac's. 22 enemy soldiers to eliminate. 600 Allied lives that would be saved if those spotters could no longer direct Luftwaffe bombers to their targets. The equation was clear. 2 versus 600. The answer should have been obvious. Except that the 2 in that equation included Daniel Hartwell, 22 years old, from a dairy farm near Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin, son of Wilhelm and Marie, third of 5 children, brother to Eric, who was only 17 and still thought war was glorious. The 2 in that equation had names and families and futures that might be measured in minutes if this went wrong. Daniel's finger rested against the trigger. 2.5 pounds of pressure. That was all it would take. The modifications he had made to this rifle, filed down carefully over weeks of secret work, meant the trigger pull was smooth as silk and deadly as intention made manifest. His father had taught him to shoot when he was 7 years old. Wilhelm Hartwell, Austrian gamekeeper turned American farmer, survivor of the trenches of the First World War, had placed a bolt-action Remington in his young son's hands and taught him a philosophy that had nothing to do with killing and everything to do with truth. A bullet travels in truth, his father had said in that heavy accent that never quite faded, no matter how many years he lived in Wisconsin. But only if you account for every lie the world tries to tell it. Wind is a lie. Distance is a lie. Heat and cold and the beating of your own heart, these are all lies that will pull the bullet from its true path. Your job is to know every lie and account for them all. Then the bullet will go where you send it. Then it will arrive in truth. At 12 years old, Daniel could hit targets at 300 yards with a consistency that made him a legend during hunting season. The other farmers would shake their heads in amazement, watching this skinny kid with the serious eyes drop deer with single shot at distances they considered impossible. His mother, Marie, a French nurse who had served in field hospitals during the Great War, had taught him something else, something darker and more necessary. She had taught him about anatomy and wound patterns, about what happened when bullets found their marks in human bodies, about the psychology of men under fire. To understand where to shoot, she had told him, you must understand what happens when the bullet finds its mark. This education, unconventional and thorough, had formed the foundation of who Daniel Hartwell became. Analytical, questioning, uncomfortable with authority that could not explain itself, obsessive about details that others overlooked. He had completed 2 years at the University of Wisconsin studying mechanical engineering when Pearl Harbor happened. December 7th, 1941, the day that changed everything. Daniel had enlisted the following morning, much to the dismay of his family, who had hoped America would stay out of European troubles. His father had survived one world war. Now his son was volunteering for another. Fort Benning, Georgia, basic training in the sweltering southern summer. That was where the instructors first noticed that Daniel Hartwell was different. While other recruits struggled with standard qualifying courses, Daniel grouped his shots within a 2-inch diameter at ranges that made hardened drill sergeants double-check their measuring tapes. Hartwell does not shoot at targets, one instructor had remarked. He negotiates with bullets. The comment had earned laughs. It had also earned Daniel a slot in specialized sniper training, where his talent became both an asset and a liability. Because Daniel did not just shoot well, he modified everything. He questioned every doctrine. He built custom cheek rests for standard-issue rifles. He altered sling configurations. He filed down trigger mechanisms to create the smooth pull he wanted. The official evaluations were mixed. Remarkable aptitude, one read. Concerning disregard for standardized protocols, another noted. By August 1942, Daniel was shipping out to England with the 1st Infantry Division known as the Big Red One. By November, he was landing in Algeria as part of Operation Torch, the Allied invasion of North Africa. By February 1943, he had 17 confirmed kills and a reputation that made some of his fellow soldiers admire him and others resent him deeply. They called him the Professor. Sometimes it was said with respect, sometimes with mockery. Hartwell makes his own rules became a common refrain in his unit. Staff Sergeant Frank Brennan, Daniel's direct superior, had tried to get him transferred twice. I have got no use for a soldier who thinks he is smarter than the entire United States Army, Brennan had written in a letter home. But then came March 1st, 1943, the day that changed everything. The day that gave Daniel Hartwell a reason to build his forbidden deflector shield and prepare to disobey direct orders. The day his friend David Martinez died. The memory came flooding back now as Daniel waited in position, watching the German observation post through his scope. He could see it as clearly as if it were happening again, could feel the sick twist in his gut, could taste the bile that had risen in his throat. Martinez had been everything Daniel was not. By the book, protocol perfect. A sniper who followed every regulation, trusted every piece of doctrine, believed that the system existed for good reasons. He and Daniel had argued about it more than once, good-natured debates about innovation versus tradition. 2 weeks before his death, Martinez had proven his point. During an engagement near Kasserine Pass, he and Daniel had worked together to eliminate 2 German machine gun positions that had pinned down an entire platoon. Martinez had done everything by the manual, minimal equipment, standard camouflage, textbook positioning, and it had worked perfectly. See, Professor Martinez had said afterward, grinning, sometimes the old way is the right way. Daniel had conceded the point, had bought Martinez a drink from the unofficial whiskey supply, had felt for a moment that maybe he was the one who needed to learn to trust the system more. 2 weeks later, on March 1st, Martinez had gone out on a solo reconnaissance mission. He had followed protocol perfectly, set up his position according to doctrine, used standard equipment, done everything right, and then a Luftwaffe Stuka dive bomber had spotted him from the air. Daniel had been 400 yards away observing a different sector when he heard the scream of the aircraft engine, had watched through his binoculars as the Stuka rolled into its attack dive, had seen the tracers from the 20-millimeter cannons ripping across the sand converging on Martinez's position. The disturbed sand pattern around Martinez's position had been visible from the air. The reflection of his scope in the 2 p.m. sun had provided a beacon. The dust cloud from his muzzle blast had confirmed the target. Daniel had run to the position after the Stuka passed, had found Martinez lying in a pool of blood that had already baked black in the desert heat. 7 bullet impacts. The scope shattered, eyes still open, staring at nothing. Daniel had vomited at the scene, had been unable to sleep for 3 nights afterward. And in those sleepless nights, lying in his tent while the desert wind howled outside, one thought had repeated itself over and over. He did everything right, the doctrine killed him. That was when Daniel started designing the deflector shield, when he began the 5 weeks of secret experimentation that led to this moment, when he decided that sometimes following orders was not the same as doing what was right. The first version had failed catastrophically. Canvas over sandbags had caught fire in the afternoon sun, nearly starting a brush fire that would have signaled every German position for miles. Brennan had screamed at him for 20 minutes. "You trying to signal the entire Africa Corps, Hartwell?" The second version had been better, but still flawed. The metal frame he constructed from salvaged aircraft parts had created a glint visible from the air. A friendly reconnaissance plane had spotted it and filed a report. More shouting from Brennan, more disciplinary reports added to Daniel's growing file. But the third version worked. The helmet liner provided insulation against heat. The mud-treated canvas eliminated all shine. The arrangement of sandbags and rocks matched the natural terrain so perfectly that it was invisible from above. Daniel had tested it repeatedly with Mac climbing to high ground and scanning with binoculars from 500 feet of elevation. The system was perfect. It was also completely illegal. By April 6, 1943, Daniel had 17 confirmed kills and 17 official reprimands in his service record. Unauthorized equipment modification, destruction of military property, failure to follow standardized procedures. The list went on. He also had a growing certainty that the way the military fought this war was getting good men killed for no reason other than adherence to doctrine written by people who had never set foot in this desert. And then came the briefing on April 6th. Captain Robert Graves standing in front of a map, his face grim. "Observation point 117 is bleeding us dry," the captain said. 22 Luftwaffe personnel, 2 forward air controllers, directing strikes that are costing us 60 casualties per day on average. The plan was straightforward. Artillery barrage on April 8th, 30,000 rounds allocated. Follow-up infantry assault with 3 companies, 220 men. Estimated friendly casualties 40 to 60 killed or wounded. Probability of success 70%. Daniel's assignment was simple. Observation only. Hold position until April 7th evening. Document patrol patterns. Then withdraw for the April 8th assault. That night in his tent, Daniel had done the mathematics. His notebook lay open on his cot, covered in calculations that had nothing to do with wind drift or bullet drop. 22 spotters multiplied by 4 bombing runs per day equaled 88 potential strikes. Each strike averaged 15 casualties. In 24 hours, those spotters would be responsible for over 1,000 potential Allied deaths. The artillery barrage would cost 50 American lives in execution. Total cost of waiting over 1,000 lives. Alternative calculation. 2 men at risk, Daniel and Mac, 26 rounds of ammunition, 22 enemy soldiers. The numbers favored action. But numbers did not account for the weight of pulling that trigger 22 times. Did not measure the cost of carrying those faces for the rest of his life. At 3 a.m. on April 7th, Daniel and Mac had slipped through the perimeter carrying the components of the forbidden deflector system. Mac had tried one last time to talk him out of it. Last chance to be smart about this, Professor. "I stopped being smart when I watched Martinez die," Daniel had replied. They had belly crawled for 2 hours through the darkness, reaching their position at 5:30 a.m. 45 minutes to construct the deflector shield. Then the waiting, the watching, the steady climb of temperature as the sun rose over a desert that cared nothing for the small human dramas playing out across its surface. At 6:15 a.m., Mac's radio had crackled to life with the order that made everything worse. All units, this is command. Artillery barrage postponed 24 hours due to ammunition shortage. All reconnaissance elements returned to base immediately. Mac had stared at Daniel. Daniel had continued adjusting his scope. Danny, that was a direct order. I heard it. So what are we doing? Accounting for wind drift at 873 yards. And now it was 9:47 in the morning. The temperature had climbed above 100 degrees. Through his scope, Daniel could see the German observation post clearly, could see the two Luftwaffe officers emerging onto an elevated platform on the eastern edge of the structure, could see them conducting what appeared to be a Hanover briefing, could see with perfect clarity the targets that would be his first and second shots. Beside him, Mac Sullivan lay prone with his binoculars watching the same scene. Mac, the baseball pitcher from Georgia, whose eye for trajectory had made him a natural spotter. Mac, who had stayed when he could have left, who had followed Daniel into this forbidden position, knowing it could cost them both everything. Range confirmed at 873, Mac whispered. Wind holding steady at 4 miles per hour left to right. Temperature 103 and climbing. No friendly aircraft in vicinity. Luftwaffe reconnaissance expected at 1100 hours. Daniel made a final adjustment to his scope. His breathing slowed. His heart rate dropped to 68 beats per minute, a trained calm that came from thousands of hours of practice. His father's words echoed in his mind. Account for every lie the world tries to tell the bullet. The lie of distance, compensated. The lie of wind, accounted for. The lie of heat distortion, calculated. The lie that following orders was always right, rejected. Through his scope, Daniel could see the senior Luftwaffe captain clearly now. A man in his 40s, perhaps gesturing as he spoke to the younger lieutenant beside him. A man with a family somewhere. A man who believed he was serving his country. A man who had directed airstrikes that killed 367 American soldiers. A man who would be dead in 90 seconds if Daniel squeezed this trigger. For a moment, the scope's crosshairs wavered. Not from poor technique, not from fear, but from the sudden crushing weight of what he was about to do. 22 men, 22 decisions, 22 moments of deliberate killing that would either save 600 American lives or haunt him until the day he died. Probably both. Max sensed the hesitation. You good, Professor? No, Daniel whispered, but I am doing it anyway. His finger tightened on the trigger. 2.5 pounds of pressure. That was all that stood between this moment and the next. Between following orders and saving lives. Between the soldier he was supposed to be and the man he had decided to become. A bullet travels in truth. Daniel exhaled half a breath, held it, felt the world narrow down to the space between heartbeats, and squeezed. The crack of the rifle shattered the desert silence. Through the scope, Daniel watched the senior Luftwaffe captain's head snap backward. The man had been mid-gesture, his hand raised as if to emphasize some point about wind patterns or bombing coordinates. Now that hand fell limply to his side as his body crumpled onto the observation platform, a dark stain spreading across the sand-colored wood. Time of flight, 1.2 seconds. Distance, 873 yards. Impact clean headshot. Confirmed kill number 1. Daniel's hands moved with mechanical precision. Chamber, another round. Brass ejecting in a golden arc, catching sunlight for a split second before falling into the sand. Bolt forward. Scope tracking to the second target. The lieutenant stood frozen. His face visible through the scope's magnification showed the exact moment of comprehension dawning. The exact instant when his brain processed that his superior officer had just died, that the dark spray across his own uniform was blood, that he was standing in the open while a sniper with perfect accuracy was already acquiring him as the next target. 6 seconds had passed since the first shot. The lieutenant's mouth opened, perhaps to shout a warning, perhaps simply in shock. Daniel squeezed the trigger again. The lieutenant fell backward, arms spreading wide as if he might catch himself against empty air. The clipboard he had been holding clattered to the platform papers, scattering in the morning breeze. Confirmed kill number 2. For 22 seconds, nothing happened. Through his scope, Daniel could see confusion rippling through the German position. Men emerging from the interior of the observation post looking toward the platform where their officers had fallen. Some thought it was heat stroke. Others stood stupidly in the open trying to understand what they were seeing. Then someone screamed, Scharfschütze, sniper. The chaos Daniel had anticipated erupted across the German position like a stone thrown into still water. Men scattered in every direction. Some dove for the sandbagged walls. Others ran for the interior bunker. A few froze completely paralyzed by the sudden introduction of death into what had been a routine morning. Radio operators, Daniel said quietly. Mac, you see them in northeast corner? Mac replied, his voice steady despite what they had just witnessed. Interior bunker, window opening at 10 o'clock from the main structure. Daniel shifted his aim. Through the narrow window opening, he could see movement. A figure reaching for radio equipment. This was priority target number 3. If the Germans sent a distress call, if they managed to radio for air support, this entire operation would end with Daniel and Mac being strafed by Messerschmitts or blown apart by Stukas. Range 8, 6-8 yards. Slight angle change compensated. The figure in the window was moving with purpose now, hands reaching for the microphone. Daniel tracked him, led him by inches squeezed. The shot took the radio operator in the shoulder and neck, not a clean kill, but enough to drop him out of sight. Daniel cursed under his breath, already chambering another round. Through the window, he could see the operator on the ground, still moving, crawling toward the radio equipment. Injured, not killed, a complication. 6 seconds later, Daniel fired again. This time the figure went still. Confirmed kill number 3. A fourth radio operator appeared taking position at the equipment. Daniel had to make a choice. The sandbagged walls of the bunker provided cover. He could not see the man clearly enough for a guaranteed shot. He could wait for a better angle, or he could take a risk. He took the risk. The Lee Enfield barked again. Daniel had fired through the sandbag wall itself, using his knowledge of the bunker's layout from 3 days of observation to make an educated guess about where the operator would be standing. For 5 seconds, nothing. Then through the window opening, he saw the operator fall sideways into view, clutching his chest. Confirmed kill number 4. But that shot had just announced to every German in the observation post that the sniper shooting at them had exceptional skill and was willing to shoot through walls. The panic intensified. On the western face of the position, a lookout was running for the heavy machine gun emplacement. If he reached it, if he got that MG-42 into action facing the right direction, Daniel and Mac would be in serious danger even at this range. The German machine gun could fire 1,200 rounds per minute. At 800 yards, accuracy would be poor, but volume of fire could make up for precision. Daniel tracked the running figure. Moving target at 40-degree angle. He led by 3 feet squeezed. The lookout stumbled, then fell forward onto his face. Back or spine shot. Confirmed kill number 5. 2 more lookouts on the southern approach began retreating toward the main structure, running in a panic. Daniel fired at the first. Leg wound not fatal. The man went down but was still moving, crawling. Daniel shifted to the second target. Headshot. Clean. Confirmed kill number 6. 1 wounded. Mac provided running commentary. They are scattering. No coordinated response yet. No radio transmissions detected. You got the operators before they could send for help. How many rounds? 8 expended. 22 remaining. Daniel's shoulder was already beginning to bruise from the rifle's recoil. 8 shots in less than 3 minutes. His right hand was cramping slightly from the repetitive motion of working the bolt. Sweat stung his eyes despite the canvas shade provided by the deflector shield. And he was just getting started. Through the scope, Daniel saw a German NCO emerge from cover, shouting orders, trying to organize a defense. This was a critical target. Leadership. The man who could turn panicked individuals into a coordinated response. Daniel recognized the rank insignia. Oberfeldwebel, Master Sergeant equivalent. The NCO was moving fast, running toward the machine gun position, gesturing for others to follow. Daniel tracked him, led him squeezed. The bullet ricocheted. Daniel watched in disbelief as sparks flew from a piece of metal equipment beside the NCO's head. The ricochet screamed away into the desert. The NCO dove for cover but was not hit. First miss, and now the Germans knew exactly which direction the shots were coming from. The MG-42 opened fire. Even at 800 yards, the sound was distinctive, a ripping noise like fabric being torn at incredible speed. Bullets impacted the sand 200 yards short of Daniel's position, sending up geysers of dirt and rock. "They cannot reach us," Max said, but his voice was tight. "They know where we are now. Does not matter." Daniel replied, already reacquiring the NCO through his scope. "Keep counting." The NCO broke from cover, sprinting toward a different position. Daniel led him perfectly this time. Exhaled, squeezed, clean chest shot. The NCO went down hard and did not move. Confirmed kill number 7. But the dynamic had changed. The Germans now understood they were under attack from the northwest. They were no longer running randomly. They were taking defensive positions, making themselves harder targets. This was going to get much more difficult. Daniel settled into a rhythm, methodical, patient, breathing controlled. Each shot was a deliberate decision, each target carefully chosen for maximum tactical effect. Shot 11, a German attempting to mount a replacement barrel for the MG-42, eliminated. Shot 13, an ammunition bearer running supplies, eliminated. Shot 15, a soldier trying to reach the radio equipment again, eliminated. Shot 16, heat mirage intensifying, missed. Shot 17, follow-up shot, eliminated. By 10:30 a.m., Daniel had fired 17 rounds and confirmed 12 kills with 1 wounded still alive somewhere in the position. 9 Germans remained. The observation post looked like a scene from a nightmare. Bodies visible on the platform, blood staining the sand. Survivors huddled behind whatever cover they could find. Daniel's water was running low. His shoulder throbbed. His eyes felt strained from the constant scope work. The temperature had climbed to 103 degrees, exactly as predicted. And then Mac's voice cut through his concentration with 2 words that made Daniel's blood turn cold. "Aircraft, southeast." Daniel froze. His finger eased off the trigger. He did not move. His head did not shift position. Through his scope, he could still see the German observation post. But somewhere behind him, approaching from the southeast, was an aircraft that could end this entire operation in seconds if it spotted them. The sound of the engine grew louder. A Messerschmitt Bf 109 Mac whispered. Low altitude, maybe 800 feet, could be routine patrol, could be responding to something. Both men pressed themselves deeper into the sand beneath the canvas canopy, completely still, not even breathing more than absolutely necessary. The deflector system's ultimate test had arrived. The Messerschmitt's engine roar grew deafening as it approached. Daniel could feel the vibration through the ground, could imagine the pilot scanning below looking for any sign of Allied activity, looking for disturbed sand patterns, looking for the glint of metal or glass that would betray a hidden position. The aircraft passed directly overhead. Daniel could see it through the narrow gaps in the canvas, could see the black crosses on the fuselage, could see the canopy, and for one heart-stopping instant, could swear he saw the pilot's helmet turning, scanning the ground. The deflector system had been designed for exactly this moment. No disturbed sand pattern because the sandbags matched the terrain perfectly. No glint because every surface was treated with mud. No heat signature visible from above because the canvas diffused it. No shadow because the low profile blended with natural rock formations. The Messerschmitt continued on its path toward observation point 117. It circled once over the German position, low and slow. The pilot would be seeing the bodies, would be seeing the damage, would be trying to understand what had happened. Then the aircraft banked, rocked its wings once as if signaling or questioning, and flew away to the northwest. 30 seconds of absolute terror. 30 seconds during which Daniel's heart rate had spiked to 142 beats per minute. 30 seconds during which both men had known that if the pilot spotted them, they would be dead within minutes. The Messerschmitt disappeared over the horizon. "Holy Mother of God," Mac breathed. "The deflector worked," Daniel said. His hands were shaking now, adrenaline dumping into his system in the aftermath of fear. "But we need to finish this fast. He might come back with friends. How many left? 9. Maybe 8 if that wounded man bled out. And they know we are here." Through the scope, Daniel could see the Germans making a decision. They were gathering near the southern face of the observation post, preparing for something. A breakout attempt, he realized. They were going to try to reach a secondary position somewhere they could signal for help. At 10:45 a.m., 8 German soldiers burst from the southern entrance in a coordinated rush. They ran in a zigzag pattern, trying to make themselves difficult targets. Professional, trained, desperate. Daniel switched to rapid fire mode. No time for careful breathing now. No time for perfect technique. Just track lead fire. Chamber. Track lead fire. Chamber. Shot 18. Running target. Clean hit. Man tumbles into the sand. Shot 19. Led too much. Missed. Sand geyser 2 feet ahead of the runner. Shot 20. Leg shot. Target stumbles but keeps moving. Shot 21. Follow up. Eliminated. Shot 22. Chest shot. Target drops mid-stride. Shot 23. Another clean elimination. 18 seconds of intensity. 5 Germans down. 2 had reached a rocky outcropping 200 yards from the main observation post. 1 wounded man was still in the original position. 6 rounds remaining in Daniel's ammunition supply. 3 targets left. The 2 Germans behind the rocks were well covered. Daniel could not get a clean shot. Every few seconds, one would peek out trying to assess the situation, then duck back. They were trapped but safe. For now, we do not have time for this, Max said, checking his watch. That Messerschmitt might return any minute. We should withdraw while we can. Daniel said nothing. His eye remained pressed to the scope. Patient, waiting. The Germans behind the rocks would make a mistake eventually. Fear and desperation always led to mistakes. 13 minutes passed. The sun climbed higher. The temperature rose to 104 degrees. Sweat dripped from Daniel's nose onto the rifle stock. His water was gone. His shoulder was a mass of bruising. His right hand cramped painfully every time he worked the bolt. But he waited. At 10:58 a.m., the younger of the 2 Germans behind the rocks raised his head for an extended look. 3 seconds of exposure. Maybe thinking the sniper had withdrawn. Maybe just desperate to see if rescue was coming. 3 seconds was enough. Daniel's shot took him in the throat. The man fell backward behind the rocks out of sight. Confirmed kill number 20. The last German behind the rocks, now alone, made a choice born of panic. He burst from cover and sprinted toward the vehicle bay where 2 Kubelwagens sat under camouflage netting. If he could reach one, if he could get the engine started, he might escape. Daniel tracked him calmly. The man was running flat out, arms pumping, no zigzag pattern, just pure terror-driven speed. Daniel led him by 3 feet, accounting for the wind, accounting for the distance, accounting for every lie the world tried to tell the bullet, and fired. The German tumbled forward, his momentum carrying him several more feet before he lay still in the sand. Confirmed kill number 21. 1 target remained. The wounded man from earlier shot in the leg during the initial chaos. Daniel could see him through the scope, lying in the shade of the main bunker, trying to crawl toward the radio equipment, leaving a trail of blood across the sand, moving slowly. Not a threat, not anymore. Max saw him too. He is not a threat, Danny. Daniel's finger rested on the trigger. Through the scope, he could see the wounded man's face. Young, maybe 20 years old, in pain, dying slowly in the desert heat. The right thing to do tactically was to leave him, save the ammunition, withdraw before more aircraft arrived. The mission was complete, 21 confirmed kills. The observation post was effectively destroyed as a functioning unit. But Daniel thought about that young German bleeding out slowly over the next hour. Thought about the pain. Thought about dying alone in a foreign desert. A bullet travels in truth. Daniel fired his final shot. The wounded German jerked once, then lay still. Confirmed kill number 22, 1100 hours. Mission complete. 22 targets eliminated. 26 rounds expended. No friendly casualties. No ammunition resupply required. Total cost 2 soldiers disobeying direct orders and 26 bullets. Daniel lifted his eye from the scope for the first time in over an hour. His hands were shaking violently now. Mac was staring at him with an expression that combined awe and horror. 22 targets, Mac said quietly. 26 shots. You actually did it. Daniel did not respond. He was staring at the observation post through his naked eyes, now seeing the reality of what he had done without the mediation of the scope. Bodies scattered across 300 yards of desert. Blood dark against pale sand. The silence that came after violence, heavy and accusatory. His stomach lurched. Daniel turned his head and vomited into the sand beside his position. Once, twice, 3 times until there was nothing left. His entire body was shaking. His hands would not stop trembling. Mac reached out, put a hand on his shoulder, said nothing because there was nothing to say. After 5 minutes, Daniel forced himself to move. Evidence removal. They had to erase all traces of their position, dismantle the deflector system, bury the metal components, scatter the sandbags to match natural terrain, erase every footprint, make it look like they had never been here. 30 minutes of methodical work while Daniel's mind replayed 22 trigger pulls, 22 decisions, 22 faces, some clear, through the scope, others just silhouettes. The young one who reminded him of his brother Eric. The radio operator he had shot through the wall, never even seeing his face. The wounded man he had killed out of mercy. At 11:30 a.m., they began the withdrawal. 3 miles of crawling and low running through the desert. Back toward Allied lines. Back toward whatever consequences awaited them. They reached the perimeter checkpoint at 2 p.m. Staff Sergeant Frank Brennan was waiting. His face was unreadable. Other soldiers were staring, whispers spreading through the camp like wildfire. Something had happened out in the desert. Nobody knew exactly what, but everybody knew it involved Hartwell and Sullivan. "Command tent," Brennan said. His voice was flat. Now, Daniel and Mac exchanged one glance. Whatever happened next, whether it was medals or court-martial, they had crossed the Rubicon. There was no going back. Mac whispered as they walked toward the command tent past rows of staring soldiers. "Whatever happens, it was worth it." Daniel thought about Martinez's body cooling in the desert sand 5 weeks earlier. Thought about the 367 Allied casualties caused by the observation post. Thought about the 600 lives that would be saved because those spotters could no longer direct Luftwaffe bombers. "Ask me again in 10 years, he replied. The command tent loomed ahead, its canvas sides rippling in the desert wind. Inside waited Captain Robert Graves and Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Parker, men who held the power to execute Daniel for disobedience or promote him for initiative. Men who would have to decide whether saving 600 lives justified violating direct orders. Daniel's hands had finally stopped shaking. His shoulder throbbed, his eyes burned from strain and sun and the salt of sweat. His throat was raw from vomiting, but he stood straight as he approached the tent. Whatever judgment came out, he would face it standing, because sometimes the mathematics were simple, 22 versus 600. Sometimes doing the right thing meant breaking the rules. Sometimes the courage to disobey required greater discipline than the courage to follow orders. And sometimes the young men from Wisconsin dairy farms had to make decisions that would haunt them for the rest of their lives, but that they would make again if given the choice, because the alternative was unconscionable. The tent flap opened. Brennan gestured them inside. Daniel Hartwell stepped forward to face his reckoning. The interior of the command tent smelled of canvas and dust and the particular tension that preceded judgment. A field desk dominated the space, covered with maps of the North African theater, marked with red and blue pins indicating Allied and Axis positions. Behind the desk sat 2 men whose decisions in the next hour would determine whether Daniel Hartwell faced a firing squad or received a commendation. Captain Robert Graves, company commander, stood to the left. 42 years old, West Point graduate career officer who had earned his rank through a combination of competence and careful adherence to military protocol. His face showed the weathering of 3 years of war, deep lines carved by sun and responsibility. Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Parker sat behind the desk. Battalion commander, 51 years old. A veteran of the First World War who had seen enough combat to understand the difference between rules written in comfortable offices and reality experienced under fire. His eyes were gray and sharp and missed nothing. Staff Sergeant Frank Brennan stood to the side, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Daniel and Mac came to attention, snapped salutes, and held position, while the 2 officers studied them in silence. 30 seconds passed, a full minute. The kind of silence that built pressure like a sealed boiler approaching explosion. Finally, Parker spoke. "At ease. Sit." Both men remained standing. Parker's eyebrow raised slightly. "I said sit, Corporal. This is not a court-martial." Yet, Daniel and Mac took seats on 2 folding chairs positioned in front of the desk. Daniel's hands rested on his knees. His uniform was still stained with desert sand and the salt marks of dried sweat. His shoulder throbbed where the rifle's recoil had bruised it over the course of 26 shots. Parker slid a photograph across the desk. An aerial reconnaissance image taken from perhaps 1,500 feet. It showed observation point 117 from above. And scattered across the position, clearly visible, even in black and white, were 22 bodies. The photograph also showed something else. No artillery craters, no vehicle tracks approaching the position, no signs of ground assault, no evidence of the massive attack that had been scheduled for April 8th. Gentleman, Parker said, his voice calm and measured. We have a mystery. An entire German observation post neutralized. 22 confirmed enemy killed in action. But according to all records, no Allied operation occurred in that sector yesterday. No artillery fire, no infantry movement, no air support. He looked directly at Daniel. His gaze was not hostile, but it was searching, weighing, judging. Would either of you know anything about this? Max started to speak. Daniel cut him off. It was me, sir. Max's head whipped toward him. Us, sir, both of us. Daniel kept his eyes forward. Private Sullivan followed my lead. I take full responsibility for the decision and any consequences. Parker leaned back in his chair. The leather creaked softly. Explain. From the beginning. Daniel explained. The words came out in a flat, factual monotone. The unauthorized departure at 0300 hours. The deflector system deployment. The withdrawal orders received at 0615 and deliberately ignored. The engagement beginning at 0949 hours and concluding at 1100 hours. 22 targets eliminated. 26 rounds expended. Method employed precision sniper fire from concealed position at ranges between 800 and 900 yards. When he finished, the tent was silent again. Parker stood, walked to the tent entrance, and stared out at the desert for what felt like an eternity. When he turned back, his expression had not changed. You are telling me, he said slowly, that you, a single sniper, eliminated an entire reinforced observation post, that we had allocated 30,000 rounds of artillery and 3 infantry companies to destroy. Yes, sir. Why? Daniel reached into his breast pocket and withdrew his notebook. The pages were worn from constant handling, stained with sweat and sand. He opened it to April 6th, where his calculations were written in neat, precise handwriting. Sir, I did the math. 22 spotters multiplied by 4 bombing runs per day equals 88 potential strikes. Average 15 casualties per strike equals 1,320 potential deaths in 24 hours. Artillery barrage would cost an estimated 50 friendly casualties. Total cost of waiting 1,370 lives. He looked up from the notebook. Alternative, sir. 2 lives at risk, mine and Private Sullivan's. 26 rounds of ammunition. 22 enemy soldiers. The equation was clear. Captain Graves stepped forward, his face flushed. The equation was also clear about following orders. Corporal, you received a direct order to withdraw. You chose to ignore it. Daniel met his gaze. With respect, Sir Corporal David Martinez followed orders. Standard doctrine, perfect protocol. He is dead. 22 Germans who helped kill him are also dead. Sometimes orders need to be updated based on reality in the field. Graves opened his mouth to respond, but Parker held up a hand. Sergeant Brennan, you have had concerns about Corporal Hartwell's conduct in the past. Multiple disciplinary reports, 2 transfer requests. Your assessment of this situation. The tent fell silent again. Daniel could hear his own heartbeat, could hear Max breathing beside him. This was the moment. Brennan had written 17 disciplinary reports on Daniel, had called him insubordinate, reckless, dangerous to unit cohesion, had tried twice to get him transferred out of the unit. Brennan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different than Daniel had ever heard it. Thoughtful, almost gentle. Sir, I have written 17 disciplinary reports on Hartwell. I have called him insubordinate, reckless, and dangerous to unit cohesion. I have requested his transfer twice. He paused. Daniel felt his chest tighten. I was wrong. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Graves stared at Brennan in disbelief. Parker's expression did not change, but something shifted in his eyes. Mac let out a breath he had been holding. Brennan continued. What Hartwell did yesterday, that is not insubordination. That is initiative. He saw a problem command could not solve quickly enough. He solved it. 22 Germans dead, 0 friendly casualties, 0 expenditure of our critically short artillery ammunition. Sir, with respect, We should be pinning a medal on him, not considering court-martial. Parker returned to his desk and sat heavily. Let us be absolutely clear about what happened here. A corporal received direct orders to withdraw. He ignored those orders. He engaged in enemy position without authorization. He utilized unauthorized, untested equipment. He expended military resources without approval. By every regulation in the manual, this is grounds for court-martial. He picked up another report from his desk. However, as of 0600 this morning, Luftwaffe bombing accuracy in this sector has dropped to nearly zero. Supply convoys are moving without interference. We have advanced our lines 6 miles beyond projected objectives. Casualty rates have decreased 78%. Parker looked at Daniel. Do you understand the position you have put me in? If I court-martial you, I am telling every soldier in this division that initiative is punishable. If I reward you, I am telling every soldier that orders are optional. Daniel held his gaze. Sir, I never thought orders were optional. I thought lives were mandatory. The silence that followed was different. Something had shifted in the tent. Parker exchanged a long look with Graves. Some wordless communication passed between them, the kind that came from years of shared command experience. Finally, Parker picked up a pen and began writing on an official form. For the record, Corporal Hartwell and Private Sullivan were conducting authorized reconnaissance of Observation Point 117. During this reconnaissance, they identified an opportunity for target engagement that fell within the scope of tactical flexibility doctrine. Their initiative resulted in complete neutralization of enemy position with zero friendly casualties. He finished writing and looked up. That is the official record. Off the record, what you did was borderline mutiny. Also off the record, it was the most effective single-soldier action I have witnessed in 23 years of service. Parker stood and walked around the desk, stopping directly in front of Daniel. You are being assigned to a special reconnaissance unit under my direct command. Your official duties will include evaluating and developing tactical innovations for desert warfare operations. In other words, Corporal, I am giving you permission to keep breaking rules, but only the ones I say you can break. Understood. Yes, sir. Perfectly understood. And Hartwell, I want a full report on this deflector system on my desk by tomorrow morning, with diagrams. If it is as effective as your results suggest, we are fielding it division-wide. Daniel was dismissed with a salute. As he and Mac walked out of the tent into the brilliant afternoon sunlight, Mac let out a long breath. I cannot believe that just happened, he said. I was certain we were going to be shot. Still might be, Daniel replied, but probably not today. The weeks that followed became a blur of activity. Daniel's deflector system was examined by division engineers, tested by other sniper teams, and refined based on feedback. By May 15, 1943, it had been adapted into a field expedient kit officially designated the Position Concealment System, M440. Among the troops, it was universally known as the Mitchell Mask, though nobody seemed to know why it was called that. The name had simply appeared and stuck. The system was issued to all sniper teams in the North African theater. Over the next 3 months, it was credited with saving 47 sniper lives. Men who would have been spotted from the air lived because of Daniel's innovation. Men who would have left widows and orphans went home after the war because a farm boy from Wisconsin had refused to let his friend's death be meaningless. Daniel was promoted to sergeant. He trained 17 sniper teams in his techniques. He developed additional innovations, a modified rifle stock better suited to desert conditions, an improved scope mount that reduced the effects of heat mirage, a revolutionary approach to camouflage that incorporated local materials, and understanding of how aerial observation actually worked in practice. In June 1943, the Silver Star ceremony was held in a dusty camp square with 200 soldiers standing in formation. Parker pinned the medal on Daniel's chest while a chaplain read the sanitized citation. For exceptional valor and initiative in combat operations. Single-handedly neutralized enemy position of significant tactical value. Demonstrated extraordinary marksmanship and tactical innovation, resulting in preservation of Allied lives and strategic advantage. After the ceremony, Parker leaned close and whispered, "You should have gotten the Medal of Honor, but that would require explaining what you actually did." "I am good with this," Sir Daniel replied. Mac received a Bronze Star for exceptional performance as spotter and combat support. Later that evening, sitting outside their tent as the sun set over the desert, Mac said, "I watched you shoot. You did the hard part. You stayed when you could have run. Daniel replied, that was harder. The North African campaign concluded in May 1943 with the surrender of Axis forces in Tunisia. The Allied victory was attributed to many factors, but buried in the after-action reports was a note about intelligence advantages gained through the elimination of key German observation posts. Daniel's name was redacted for operational security. The official record would never show that one soldier with 26 bullets had changed the tactical situation in an entire sector. But the men who served with him knew the story spread through the division, then through the entire theater. Embellished sometimes, distorted often, but at its core remained the truth. Hartwell had broken the rules and saved 600 lives. By the time Daniel shipped out for the European theater in preparation for the Italy invasion, his confirmed kill count stood at 39. He had 0 friendly casualties from his operations. 4 major equipment innovations had been adopted. 17 sniper teams had been trained. And an estimated 600 lives had been saved directly or indirectly by his actions on April 7, 1943. He also had 17 reprimands in his service record, and nightmares that woke him screaming most nights. The faces of 22 German soldiers, particularly the young one, who had reminded him of his brother. The mercy kill of the wounded man. The cold mechanical efficiency with which he had pulled the trigger 26 times in 70 minutes. The mathematics had favored action. The morality was more complicated. Daniel carried both calculations for the rest of his life. The war ended in August 1945 with Japan's surrender. Daniel Hartwell returned to Wisconsin with an honorable discharge, the rank of staff sergeant, and decorations that included the Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars, and a Purple Heart from a shrapnel wound he had received during the Italian campaign. His service record showed 17 reprimands and 12 commendations. The contradictions defined him. Reintegration into civilian life was difficult. The nightmares continued. Loud noises made him flinch. He could not sleep without checking sight lines and escape routes. The Veterans Administration provided therapy. Daniel attended faithfully for 2 years. The therapist, a kind man who had served in the First World War, explained that some wounds never fully healed. You learn to live with them, he said. You learn to function, but they never really go away. Daniel returned to the University of Wisconsin and completed his mechanical engineering degree in 1947. That same year, he met Catherine Webb, a nursing student whose calm presence and understanding silences reminded him of his mother. She knew about his war service in general outline. She never pressed for details. Some doors she understood were closed for good reasons. They married on June 12, 1946, Daniel's 25th birthday. Built a modest home outside Madison, raised 3 children, William born in 47, Marie born in 49, and Eric born in 52 and named after Daniel's younger brother. In 1949, Daniel founded Hartwell Precision Instruments, a small company specializing in optical systems for surveying and engineering applications. It was a conscious choice. No military contracts, no tools of death. He had spent 4 years of his life perfecting the science of killing at distance. Now he wanted to build tools that help construct rather than destroy. The company was moderately successful, never made Daniel wealthy, but provided comfortable stability for his family. He coached youth baseball, a nod to Max Sullivan's background. He was active in the local community. To his neighbors, he was simply a veteran who had served in North Africa and Italy. They did not know about April 7, 1943. They did not know about the 22 faces that still visited Daniel in dreams. He rarely spoke about the war. His children knew he had been a soldier. They knew he had medals in a box in the attic. They did not know the details and did not ask. Catherine protected that silence, understanding it was necessary for Daniel's survival. The years passed. Daniel's hair went gray. The nightmares became less frequent, but never stopped completely. He built a successful business, raised good children, lived a quiet, productive life that bore no outward resemblance to the young sniper who had disobeyed orders and killed 22 men in 70 minutes. But in 1967, the past reached out and pulled him back. The letter arrived on official Army letterhead. The United States Army Sniper School at Fort Benning requested the consultation of Mr. Daniel Hartwell, veteran sniper, regarding position concealment techniques in adverse terrain. The invitation was polite but formal. Daniel's first instinct was to decline. He had put that part of his life behind him. He did not want to dredge up memories that had finally begun to fade. Then Mac Sullivan called. Mac, now Major Sullivan, retired, living in Atlanta, still maintaining contact after 22 years. "They are using your system," Danny Mac said over the phone. "Your deflector design. It is standard equipment now. They manufacture it with fancy materials, but it is still your design. You should see what you started." Daniel agreed to go. He told Catherine it would be a short trip, just a few days. She smiled and kissed him and said nothing about the tension she saw on his shoulders. Fort Benning in 1967 was vastly different from the training facility Daniel remembered from 1942. Modern buildings, sophisticated equipment, but the fundamentals remained the same. Young men learning to shoot at distance, learning patience and precision in the cold mathematics of taking human life. The instructor cadre gave Daniel a tour. They showed him the position concealment system M43, his deflector design manufactured with ballistic nylon and aluminum alloy instead of torn sandbags and salvaged aircraft parts. They showed him the training manual, which credited the innovation to battlefield adaptation by unnamed personnel, North African Theater, 1943. Daniel found it amusing. If they knew it started with me stealing a helmet liner and raiding a crashed plane, he told Mac they would probably rescind the design. He gave one lecture to the instructor cadre. 40 men and all experienced combat veterans, and all teaching the next generation of snipers. The topic was innovation under constraint. Daniel did not mention observation point 117 by name. The mission was still technically classified. Instead, he focused on problem-solving methodology, on questioning assumptions, on adapting to reality rather than forcing reality to conform to doctrine. At the end, 40 men stood and gave him a standing ovation. One young instructor, maybe 30 years old, approached afterward. "Sir, did you serve?" "Yes," Daniel replied. "North Africa, 42 through 43. What unit?" Sir Daniel smiled slightly. "I would have to shoot you if I told you." The instructor laughed, thinking it was a joke. Daniel walked away before the man could ask follow-up questions. On the flight home, Daniel stared out the window at clouds and thought about the strange circularity of life. The system he had built in desperation and grief had become standard equipment. His innovation, born from watching Martinez die, had saved 47 lives in the war, and countless more since. The military that had nearly court-martialed him had adopted his methods wholesale. But none of that changed the fundamental equation. 22 men still died. 22 faces still visited his dreams. The mathematics still said he had made the right choice. The morality still felt complicated. Daniel lived 22 more years after that visit to Fort Benning. Quiet years, good years. He watched his children grow and marry and give him grandchildren. He retired from his company at age 65. He took Catherine on trips they had always planned but never gotten around to. He lived as the therapist had told him decades earlier, learning to function with wounds that never fully healed. On March 3, 1989, Daniel Hartwell died of a heart attack in his workshop. He was 67 years old. He was surrounded by optical instruments and old blueprints. Catherine found him there, slumped over his workbench, a half-finished design for a new surveying telescope still under his hands. The funeral was held on March 7th at a small church outside Madison. 60 people attended, family, friends, former colleagues from the company. The obituary in the local newspaper mentioned his war service but included no details. Just the basic facts: served in North Africa and Italy, awarded the Silver Star, founded Hartwell Precision Instruments, survived by wife Catherine, 3 children, 7 grandchildren. Nothing about April 7, 1943. Nothing about 22 German soldiers. Nothing about the deflector system or the 600 lives saved or the 26 bullets that changed tactical doctrine. Daniel had declined military honors for his funeral. No flag-draped coffin, no rifle salute, just a simple service followed by burial in a civilian cemetery. During the reception afterward, an elderly man approached William Hartwell, Daniel's eldest son. The man was in his late 60s, walked with a slight limp, had kind eyes and a gentle smile. "You are Danny's eldest?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "Did you know my father? I served with him, North Africa. My name is Marcus Sullivan. Your father might have mentioned me. We called each other Mac and Danny." William's eyes widened. "Mac Sullivan. Yes, I've heard your name a few times over the years. Dad did not talk much about the war, but he mentioned you." Mac reached into his coat and withdrew a small leather notebook, worn and stained, and obviously very old. Your father gave this to me the night before the most important day of our lives. He made me promise that if something happened to him, I would get it to his family. He came home, so I never gave it to you. But I kept it all these years, and now feels like the right time. He handed the notebook to William. It fell open to a page dated April 7th, 1943. The page was covered in precise handwriting. Times ranges, wind calculations, temperature readings. 22 numbered entries running from 0949 hours to 1100 hours. At the bottom of the page, in slightly shaky handwriting, as if written later, were additional words. 22 confirmed. 600 plus saved. No regrets. But I will see their faces until I die. William stared at the page. Mac, what is this? Your father, Mac said quietly, with my help, eliminated an entire German observation post. 22 men, 1 hour, single sniper. It was called impossible. He did it anyway. Saved hundreds, maybe thousands of lives. Got a silver star and a reprimand on the same day. William looked up, tears in his eyes. Why did he never tell us? Because he was a humble man, Mac replied, and because he carried the weight of those 22 deaths every day. He was a hero who never wanted to be one. That is the rarest kind. Catherine was standing nearby listening. She was crying now. I knew he had nightmares, she said. I never knew why. Mac put a hand on her shoulder. He was a good man who made a hard choice, and he made the right one. But right choices still carry weight. The story Mac told that afternoon, standing in a church hall in Madison, Wisconsin in March 1989, was the story Daniel had carried in silence for 46 years. The story of Martinez's death and the Deflector system, of disobeying orders and killing 22 men in 70 minutes, of saving 600 lives and paying for it in nightmares that never stopped. William asked for the notebook. Mac gave it to him. It sits now in a display case at the Army War College, part of an exhibit on tactical innovation and moral courage in combat. The case includes Daniel's Silver Star, a photograph of him at age 22 in desert uniform, holding his Lee Enfield, and a plaque explaining what happened on April 7th, 1943. The exhibit is titled Observation Point 117, a case study in initiative and moral complexity. It is taught to officer candidates as part of their ethics curriculum. The question posed to each class is simple and impossible. Would you have made Hartwell's choice? Knowing the tactical risk, knowing the moral weight, knowing you would carry those 22 faces to your grave. There is no correct answer, only necessary ones. At Fort Moore, formerly Fort Benning, the sniper school maintains a small memorial to innovations in position concealment. The centerpiece is an original M43 system from 1943, battered and worn and displayed under glass. Next to it is a modern version, sleek and sophisticated, but based on the same principles. The plaque reads, designed by Staff Sergeant Daniel Hartwell, 1st Infantry Division, North Africa, 1943. His innovation saved an estimated 47 sniper lives in World War II. Principles still taught in modern military doctrine. His deflector system evolved into current thermal concealment technology. Below that, a quote in Daniel's own handwriting, taken from his notebook. A bullet travels in truth, but only if you account for every lie the world tries to tell it. Every sniper who graduates from that school walks past that display. Everyone learns about April 7th, 1943, about the farm boy from Wisconsin who broke every rule to save 600 lives, about the price he paid and the legacy he left. And in Madison, Wisconsin, in a small cemetery on a hillside overlooking farmland that looks very much like the dairy farm where Daniel grew up, there is a simple headstone. Daniel Hartwell, June 12, 1921 to March 3, 1989. Beloved husband, father, grandfather, veteran. Nothing about heroes or medals or 22 confirmed kills, just the basic facts. Because Daniel Hartwell never wanted to be remembered for what he did on April 7, 1943. He wanted to be remembered for what he built afterward, for the family he raised and the business he created and the quiet, productive life he lived despite the weight he carried. But history remembers both. The man who broke the rules because sometimes the rules are wrong. The soldier who trusted his own judgment over orders from above. The sniper who killed 22 men to save 600. The veteran who lived 46 more years, haunted by faces in his dreams, but certain he would make the same choice again. Because sometimes the mathematics are simple. 22 versus 600. Sometimes doing the right thing means breaking every rule. Sometimes the courage to disobey requires greater discipline than the courage to follow orders. And sometimes, most importantly, the weight of doing the right thing is a burden worth carrying for the rest of your life. Because 600 men came home from that war. 600 men who would have died if German spotters had continued directing Luftwaffe bombers. 600 men who married and raised families and built lives in the decades after 1945. They never knew Daniel Hartwell's name. Never knew that a farm boy from Wisconsin disobeyed orders and killed 22 men so they could live. Never knew about the Deflector shield or the 26 bullets or the 70 minutes that changed the tactical situation in an entire sector of the North African theater. But they lived. And that in the end was the only mathematics that mattered. Daniel Hartwell saved 600 lives on April 7th, 1943. And he carried 22 faces in his nightmares until March 3rd, 1989. Both calculations were true. Both weights were real. And the man who bore them did so without complaint or expectation of recognition, because that is what heroes do. They make the hard choices, they bear the weight, and they live with the consequences because the alternative is unconscionable. This is the story of Staff Sergeant Daniel Hartwell, farm boy, sniper, innovator, rebel, hero, a man who understood that sometimes the greatest act of discipline is knowing when the rules must be broken. His story is complete. His legacy endures. And 600 men lived because one man had the courage to trust his own judgment when orders conflicted with truth. Remember his name, honor his choice, and understand that the real heroes are often the ones who never wanted recognition but earned it through actions that haunt them forever. 22 died so 600 could live. Staff Sergeant Daniel Hartwell never forgot the arithmetic, or the faces, neither should we.